Probably the biggest common theme is when people say they're having a strategy day, they generally aren't.
And then when you get them all to sit down and say, well, like, let's get a common view. Some of them look amazed. It's like, oh, is that what we're doing? Seems to me that quite often there's actually a disagreement about where you are in the first place.
But big companies, they always complain that they're not agile enough. So what they do is they write the word agile as their values, laminate it, stick it on the wall, and then they'll create 3 committees that are about agile working and how we're going to do it.
But the quote goes along the lines of, the future doesn't happen. The future results from the conversation that we have today.
They go, oh, what is the difference between a vision and a mission and an ambition and an objective and a fundamental question about who are you, right? Who are you? What do you do? Why do you do it? Like, why does the world need you in it?
It should be a simple set of statements that everybody can refer to every day.
The boss is really excited by AI. How can we put AI into what we do?
Us being all dinosaurs and have been in this game for years, we might see this as, oh, this is a flaky new generation, and what on earth are these people talking about?
I think it's more that you have to work hard for loyalty. So it's about being curious. If you're really struggling to define your business, turn it into a light bulb joke.
Welcome everybody to this episode of Work Punks. As always, we have Colin Newlyn of Decrapify Work, Ben Simpson of Vital Organizations, and myself, Paul Jansen from TrustWorks. But we are super excited that we have a guest today, Natasha Bye, who combines strategy and comedy. Now, I'm really curious, Natasha. Tell us how, why, and how you landed in that place. I'm really intrigued.
Well, hello, all of you, and I'm delighted to join you. So, yeah, I'm Natasha. So my core job, my business, is helping people to get really clear on their strategy for success, whatever that looks like. So it might be through consultancy or might be through training. But separate to that, I'm a comedian, and I've realized that if you combine the two, it helps people. It's much easier for people to understand what not to do if you kind of make a bit more of a humorous play with that and use a bit of comedy. If I'm emceeing a meeting or hosting a meeting, which I do also, then, 8 hours can be a very long time without any jokes. So try to bring a bit of humor into what I do, but it doesn't mean that people's strategies aren't serious. I understand this is their livelihood, so I take that very seriously.
Now you have quite a illustrious track record. I believe you've worked with large corporates for quite a while. You've got a PhD in biochemistry, if I recall correctly, as well. So tell us in the briefest of excerpts how you went through that journey and decided to focus on this strategy.
Yeah, sure. Well, I have the amazing transferable skills of spending 4 years killing insects with fungi. So you can tell that's really relevant to what I do now. But no, I started out in biology and biochemistry. It was my passion. I still love all things science, but I am a communicator. So the bit that I loved was not so much the pipetting, it was talking about the pipetting. So going to all the international conferences. But I really like the application of science to real life, which is why I ended up in kind of scientific and medical roles in the corporate world. But then I really understood. So I spent 20 years in the corporate world, UK, Ireland, Australia, New Zealand, also some time in the Asia Pacific and the leadership team, but really understanding how do you lead teams? And that's where I got my real passion for strategy and what not to do and how to navigate the technical term, which is corporate guff, to get, well, how do you grow? I left the corporate world in 2019. I still have a foot in the door because I'm a non-exec director for a big trade body. But I love working with businesses, small and big, to get really clear on what would be a thriving business for them and how do you get people to come with you. So that's kind of in a nutshell. And then the comedy, well, I think I stood in once at work. We had a conference and they couldn't afford Lenny Henry. So I hosted the awards and found that if people were employed and you're a director, they laugh more. So yes, that's how I got into comedy, really.
When it comes to strategy, you said you work with small companies, you work with large companies. What are some of the common themes that you've learned in your work with those kind of organizations?
Well, probably the biggest common theme is when people say they're having a strategy day, they generally aren't. So, because a lot of people, strategy, people get very confused about it and they mix it up with planning. So they might spend hours and hours planning what they're going to do next Tuesday, working out some KPIs to measure how successful the thing is they do on Tuesday. But the thing that I try to help people to do is make some of those big choices. So about really what kind of business they are and what they're not, where they want to get the growth from, and where they're not going to be looking, how are they going to go about it? So it's really around being clear on, I think the better word than strategy is their intent. If you replace the word strategy with intent, people tend to get it. So strategy is your intent, your actions are your tactics and stuff, and it makes it easier. So that's probably one of the things companies do. And quite often they'll say, oh, well, we're having lots of discrepancies in the boardroom or in their small teams. And it's because they're arguing over the little stuff, because they've kind of assumed they're on the same page in the big stuff, but they've never really approached that bit. And sometimes that's how you can help them get really, really super clear. And then suddenly everyone knows what they're doing.
Colin, you've had some dabbling in strategic planning you shared with us earlier. So
yes. Guilty as charged.
and how comedic were they?
Yeah, they weren't really very funny, but I completely get that bit about people sort of thinking they're all pointing in the same direction, and so they're arguing because they're actually talking about different things. And then when you get them all to sit down and say, well, like, let's get a common view, some of them look amazed. It's like, oh, is that what we're doing?
Yeah.
So it's like, well, how on earth did we get here? Because this person's been in the company for 5 years, and they had no idea what the business was supposed to be trying to do. So yeah, that's very much it. It reminded me of the original McKinsey's 7S structure. Instead of it being they call it, I can't remember what they call it now. It was supposed to be superordinate goal, shared values. That's what they called it. And the original model was superordinate goal. And they took that out because they thought it was too complicated for their consultants to sell, and put in shared values, which was completely made up and has caused all sorts of damage ever since. But it sounds to me that what you're talking about is that superordinate goal, basically getting everybody pointing at the same thing and on the same page to mix my metaphors up.
And I think SOG as an acronym was a disaster for them as well. But the thing is, there are loads of different templates, models and stuff you can use in strategy. And sometimes they're useful and sometimes they're not. But it's kind of like, it's sort of like when you're doing a plan, you're working out how to get from A to B. When you're doing a strategy, you've got to work out what does A look like, what is B, who on earth is doing the traveling from A to B in the first place, and how they're going to get there. So it's all those kind of parts together. And you can use the stuff from McKinsey, the stuff from Harvard Business School, all those different tools, however you want. But it's getting kind of clear, because my philosophy on strategy is the collars and cuffs have got to match, right? So whatever you're trying to achieve, your actions need to match up to them. And quite often you'll have exercises, even big corporates, tiny ones, will do the exercise of like the vision and mission. They'll come up with amazing, beautiful, crafted statements. They'll spend ages on their values and behaviors, but then actually what they do day to day bears no resemblance to that at all. I use a lot in the comedy comes into it. Is like, I don't know if you know that game as kids, when you do things with kids, and it's like, would you rather have an arm on your nose or a nose on your arm, or those stupid things? If you do that kind of thing in a business, you can tease out where there are differences of opinion that don't come out in a PowerPoint slide. So it's assumed that all the directors are aligned, but if you throw opportunities at them, would you rather this or this? And if you get two completely different answers, that's a clash. And I had that with as a company not long ago that worked in facades. They had a beautiful vision, which was about, they were going to change the face of London, and it was all about really high quality projects. But some of them are really around, well, you know what, it's whatever the client wants. And I said, okay, so the Natural History Museum came to you and said, would you mind pebble dashing the front of our beautiful building? If that's what the client wants, half of them said, I'd do it. The other half said, oh no, be awful. So that's where you see the clashes.
Seems to me that quite often there's actually a disagreement about where you are in the first place. So they all think A is somewhere different. And they also have don't have a common idea about what their capabilities are. So
Yeah,
there's this sort of like they've told themselves a bunch of stories, often different stories, which actually don't bear any relationship, and they tend to be unwilling to really go there because then it'll be a bit embarrassing.
Yeah, well, I think it's the danger of assumptions. So we are, I don't know, perhaps Paul can answer, it's a Dutch thing, but as British people, we don't like always to state the bleeding obvious or make assumptions for risk of looking really stupid. So we can use a lot of words and we can hide behind that. But just sitting in a room, and that's why it's quite nice when you have an outsider coming in who asks those obvious questions. So what kind of company are you? You know, because it tells you where you might be growing, different directions you may take. So I often ask people the basic question when I come in, like if you're in the back of a taxi and someone asks you who do you work for, and they've never heard of them, how do you describe that? And they all come up with something quite different. I always ask people what their meatloafs are. So meatloafs, I would do anything for business, but I won't do that. You know, so you take out the stuff that you wouldn't do and the stuff that you would do. It all sounds kind of obvious, but it's actually quite hard. And I think people fake because you have to make choices. We don't naturally like making choices. We kind of keep everything.
Yeah, that's certainly been my experience with working on strategy with organizations, is that they find it really difficult, especially, and you must have this in these larger corporations that, of course, have got gazillions of products, gazillions of services are probably spread all over the world. Yeah, how to go back to some sort of comprehensive strategy that allows you to then also logically let go of certain activities that perhaps actually no longer make sense. That's really, really hard.
Really, really hard, especially when it's quite often. But it's also, the starting point is just being really honest. It's not wrong. So you can just sit there and say, right, okay, we're doing this. It doesn't really fit with where they are, but Paul really liked it. And so, but even if you're just really honest, it's there because it was something that a senior director wanted to do and they've kind of somehow done it and it's sort of sat there. But it's fine. And you can hang on to it as long as you know and you're honest. That's why it's there. It's when you try and pretend to sort of fit it in. And we said, oh, it's because it fits in our whole mission is the juxtaposition of consumer-centric, and you're trying to sort of shoehorn stuff in. Don't, just be really honest. It's there because we tried it out and actually it was quite fun. I think that's where there's a lot that small business can learn from the big companies, and there's a lot that big companies can learn from small businesses. I observed a strategy day for a charity recently. So I was actually invited just to observe because one of the trustees has got an MBA. So he said, I've got it covered. And it was really, really fun in a way because he's a very clever guy. But he spent 2 hours, a strategy day for a tiny charity. And he spent 2 hours basically condensing an entire MBA. We looked at Potter's forces and everything. And after 2 hours, this woman back just went, yeah, you're right. We do need a bigger bus. And it was just like, it's crazy. So all those models and things that have been created, they can be really helpful. If you're a big organization and you've got to work out, crikey, we've got 300 different services, 400 different products, where are we going to prioritize? You'll need some sort of framework. But even before you touch that, you've got to work out how are you going to decide? Is it, do you even what shape your business you want to be? Do you want it to be doing lots of things and that's how you get your income, but each thing might have low profitability, or you want to do a fewer things that have high profitability? Just some basic choices that you can make your other decisions afterwards. But big companies, they always complain that they're not agile enough. So what they do is they write the word agile as their values, laminate it, stick it on the wall, and then they'll create 3 committees that are about agile working and how we're going to do it. And actually, there's probably a lot you could cut through. Like a small company, if I work with them, I'll give them a suggestion, and then next week they've done it. Work with a big company, and it's got as far as Paris. You're waiting for the next committee. It's crazy, really, but we do it as humans because we create that sort of structure that holds things back.
There's a lovely quote which I always find myself returning to, but the quote goes along the lines of, the future doesn't happen. The future results from the conversation that we have today. And what I'm getting from this conversation is strategy development, if you boil it all down, is really just dependent on the quality of the conversation that you have. As Tash says, that may be helped and enabled and guided by some sort of structure, but that structure needs to be in the service of something. You don't want to have the structure for the sake of having the structure, as per your learned MBA friend. But I can absolutely, this is making so much sense to me, because, you know, the more we are able to de-jargonize that conversation, the more we are able to have a lightness to it through a bit of humor. You can just see that the level of creativity is going to go up, the ability to think beyond their current constraints is going to go up, and that all's got to feed into a better strategy. So Paul's opening was a good one. Strategy and comedy, come on, Tash. You know, how do those two fit together? But this conversation's really helping me make sense of that, and I can absolutely see it.
It's just knowing that I value humor as a way of kind of tease out what you're not going to do, because it's really about clarity at the end of the day. And I think your point, Ben, about jargon is really key. So quite often when I've done training to people on strategy, the thing that people get most worried about, and it really doesn't matter, they go, oh, what is the difference between a vision and a mission and an ambition and an objective? And because even these basic terms get completely mishmashed. So if you split them out and just turn everything into questions. So like when I have my own sort of training model that I've done, is the fundamental question about who are you, right? Who are you? What do you do? Why do you do it? Like, why does the world need you in it? Who do you do it for? Where are those people and how do you do it? That's kind of like almost a fundamental. Now, other people would say that's your mission and purpose. Fine, but that's it. And then when it comes to what you want, so your vision, I say, well, what do you dream about? What do you, don't forget what targets, forget everything else. What is the big dream of where you want to be in the future? And then you get close, and what do you want to achieve by this date? And what would you have needed to have done? If you use that kind of language, it makes it basic. You know, I always say, well, the one I always say is like how awful the corporate world takes dreaming out of people. Yeah. You know, if the great Reverend Martin Luther King, right, Jr., had been in the corporate world, he would have stood there and said, I have a dream. Oh, can I have my next slide, please? Oh, you probably can't see that at the back, but point one of my dream is this. Point two, and here are my KPIs, whatever else. And people wouldn't have got it. So it's about the power of dreaming and knowing what you're aspiring to. And that's what brings creativity. It doesn't mean you have to have mapped out every single thing towards that dream for the next 10 years, but just to kind of think, well, what do we fantasize about? What would we love to happen for this business? And then you can actually start making it a reality.
Apart from, I did write a couple of massive strategy documents that talked about.
I've written many, so yeah.
Talked about the next 5 years and all that sort of nonsense. And I thought the most valuable part of that actually was the situational analysis, because it comes back to my point earlier, which I always like to quote the joke about the man driving around in Ireland trying to get to the ferry, and having passed this yokel for the third time, he stops and says, please tell me how to get to Dublin. And the yokel says, well, if you want to be getting to Dublin, I wouldn't be starting from here.
Yeah, that's about it. Yeah.
And that's it there. That's sort of like sums to me where many companies start with strategy. They think they need to be somewhere else. But what was I rambling on about that for?
The situation.
Yeah, so the strategy should be something that is actually not this big document that's been done in 5 away days by the board or whatever. It should be a simple set of statements that everybody can refer to every day, so that when they're making a tactical decision, they can say, is this getting us where we need to go to? So, for example, I worked in an organisation where they would basically, anybody who walked in the door with money, they'd build something. And I would always have to say, hang on a minute, how does it? This is completely different to everything else we've done. Like, how does this fit into where we're trying to get to? And eventually, I managed to stop some of them. Yeah, but that's the use of strategy, isn't it? That's saying, look, if we can get everything pointing in the same direction, we're going to be more successful than if we're going off in all different directions.
Well, thing is, or they could have made the choice. If the choice is our strategic decision is we're going to do absolutely anything anyone asks us and we're going to go in lots of directions, then that's clear. That's what we're going to do. It's when they try and pretend they're not and they still do that.
Doing that. Yeah.
There's no reason you can't spend. I'm not saying it doesn't take a lot of time to do this. I'm not saying those things, but it's yes, you have some sort of statements and then you have some flex, but you can't build it in isolation to what's going on. I mean, and COVID was really interesting for people with strategies because what it did was it accelerated the trends that were already happening. Yeah. So, but it just made them happen a lot quicker. But it made people have to make decisions really, really quickly. And the companies I think that did really well is because they had a very strong heart of what they're about, why they did stuff. They could make those decisions really quickly. The other people who were in a bit of a crumbly mess were having to react and learn. So you can have all the detail behind it, but have two documents. One is your business profile on a page, which is your what, why, who, where, how, really summarized, and then have your strategy on a page, which literally kind of says, this is what you're dreaming for. This is what you want to try and achieve. Where do you need to get that stuff from? What's the biggest thing stopping you? Therefore, the headline, what you're going to try and do about it, and then kind of 3 or 4 things, and how you're going to manage to keep that going. It can all fit on one page, so you can glance at it and see that it joins up.
There's a tension, or maybe there's a link between the way organizations are structured and operate and the way they go about strategy. So are these big organizations capable of doing strategy the way that you say, or does it require them to become more adaptable and agile themselves and less we would say more self-organized, more fluid structures?
Yeah, I mean, it is difficult. The more people you have, the harder it is, because on the flip side, you couldn't say, right, let's get 1,500 people in a room and write a strategy, everybody, because let's face it, writing by committee is awful. But I think it's about the fact you should kind of be able to drill into things. You can go deeper and deeper. So, for example, you might, in a really big organization that has multiple parts to it, you can have a high level and say, look, do you know what? Where we're really going to accelerate is in these areas. We're gonna keep going in these areas, and we're going to stop doing these areas. That's why I think the biggest tool you can use in strategy is look at your rate limiting steps. So if you had a kind of ambition, what's the biggest thing holding us back right now? Is it an attitude shift we need to make? Is it something inside us that we need to change? We did an example I remember years ago working on an allergy product for babies, and it's already got very high share. It's already a great product. Everyone knows about it. Where's the growth going to come from? Well, the rate limit. I asked the team, what's the breakthrough issue? What's the rate limiting step? And someone said, oh, well, because people are having fewer babies. I said, well, that certainly has an impact on your sales, but what are you going to do about that? We can sort of pipe Barry White into people's homes. But the biggest rate limiting step was babies were going undiagnosed. So you put all your efforts, it's just a product strategy, but put all your efforts in driving up earlier diagnosis. It's great, it reduces suffering, and sales were kickstarted again, because you're putting all your efforts, sales, marketing, medical operations, all on driving up earlier diagnosis. So it's about putting all your efforts in one place, because the thing you're trying to overcome, really.
So in your work, have you identified any trends that are fairly recent? Obviously, we had the pandemic, and that has, as you said yourself, has upset the apple cart a little bit, and showed some organizations up, and others have benefited greatly. We've seen quite a bit, and we've been talking about this on a monthly basis, at least in our Punks episodes, that it's had massive impact on how organizations are rethinking how they organize work. But strategically, and listening to you, I think you seem to be talking a lot about the commercial strategy of companies. So are there any particular trends that you've been picking up recently?
A lot of people, I think yes, I do a lot of commercial strategy, but obviously underpinning that, you have your operations and your staffing strategy. Interesting, actually, the biggest thing that's hit people is staffing. It's not just been about where they work, it's completely different attitudes to what people want from work and to achieve. And I think it's a bit of an eye-opener for people. For small businesses, it's really interesting that from a commercial growth thing, every single one I've worked with is, the term is flakiness. They're finding people, the level of unreliability, flakiness of decisions, people changing their mind more often. And actually it's distilled to the corporate level. So beforehand, you'd have individuals being a bit more flaky, changing their mind, not following through, responding, but it's translating upward as these people come in senior positions. So that's kind of an interesting one. AI is obviously a massive one, and people tend to approach it from a couple of different angles, either complete abject terror. How do we protect ourselves from AI because it's going to destroy the business because our services are replaceable or whatever else? Or the boss is really excited by AI. How can we put AI into what we do? So it's that kind of way, rather than just thinking, actually, if your core purpose is clear, it may or may not be relevant, you know, and look at continuous. So I think that's been quite a big one. Obviously, the fact that things can, you know, traditionally, I guess businesses were very much around location was a big thing, about you had to be there. So if you wanted to go, you'd have to put whole teams into places. Whereas now, because we are so digital, because things are virtual, and you can create models that will work, and the world is a smaller place technically. So growth strategies into different markets is more about how you learn, how you do that, which is different. I think politically, a lot of instability, people are making choices about where to invest from. This is a very high level, but even small companies, I think it's different trends about that whole customer service thing is huge. I think people talk about customer journeys, but it is a big thing, is that the experience people have, it's no longer enough to have a great product or a great service. It's about how easy. So I think that's been how easy it is to be able to access those things, the experience you have at every step of the way. So I think a lot of companies, even like tiny ones, are looking at that whole experience. You know, if you're just running a physiotherapy clinic, what's the experience from the moment you phone up and make an inquiry to being seen by someone? So more joined up on that side of things, I think, is coming through, and what people are trying to look to do and to change, really. But
tell me more about the flakiness bit. That's really that sounds really intriguing.
It is really intriguing. So I was just with the client the other day, and it just, you know, it's just flaky. It's kind of, so they have a business where people stay with them from, you know, they have a business where kids would come to them early years and stay till they're 18. It's a dance school. And they've said post-COVID just doesn't happen now, because, so this was just an attitude change within families. Well, what do you want to do next, darling? What do you want to do next? So people are not staying with it. So it has a massive impact on the business. People seeing that people are shopping around more. So a lot of companies have seen, like, even their business clients have stayed with them for years and years and years. You do. It's like, you know, your insurance, your kind of certain services, you stay with them. Even banks, you know, let's face it, the first bank you join when you're a student, and then you're still with them. But people seeing now that it's, I guess the term flake, it's always more changeable. People going, no, I don't want to. I'm going to change my mind. I'm going to change my mind a lot more. Or I'm not going to follow through. I'm going to get quite far with somebody and then change my mind at the last minute and not book. So it's more in kind of consumer behavior. You could say it's just because of more choice, but a lot of people say to me, flaky, cash flow. A lot of people, the businesses that are chasing payments from people are finding a lot of work. People are much slower to pay. Want to prove. So it's just really interesting. It's just an attitude. It's just changed since COVID. And it's hard to kind of nail it down. You know, the fact we do have so much more choice.
But it's also the opposite of loyalty, right? In a way. And I think in a lot of aspects of our worlds, well, a lot of people have been betrayed, I think, in their perceived loyalty, because, I don't know, with their employer, because ultimately they didn't really they weren't particularly loyal. Their employers weren't, when push came to shove.
Yeah, it goes both ways, isn't it?
Exactly.
It goes both ways. It's
and
kind
so
of
your banks. Yeah. And how many organizations have you not been signed up with for years as a client, and then you find out actually you get your poorer insurance premium quote because you're not a new client that they want, but
yeah, we reward the new and not the old. So I think, but that's kind of tipping over. So a big part of, because people always focus on growth, isn't it? Growth, growth, growth. How do we get more new people? How do we sell more stuff? And then actually people realizing you've got to invest in maintaining. So you have to work very hard to retain your customers, to retain your employees.
Yeah. So
you need strategies. You need to be really clear that of how you're going to keep people.
Yeah.
So saying it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's not the company.
Yesterday, this article about someone who, and I hear this echoing from, I hear this a lot in the business world of managerial staff who increasingly find it difficult to manage their employees because they feel they have to walk on eggshells because a bit of a stern word of feedback immediately gets translated into harassment, the formal complaint, investigation. So from a lens of us being all dinosaurs and have been in this game for years, we might see this as, oh, this is a flaky new generation and what on earth are these people talking about? Or is it something else? Or is it that we have, and then I'm coming back to the word that Ben used, is are we having the wrong conversations with people because we're simplifying too much and we're looking through our lens. We're looking through the lens of, oh, we want to acquire new customers, so let's do these special offers and screw the existing customers because they will stay with us anyway. But actually, we have to change our conversation. We have to, and so from the commercial perspective, for instance, but also from our employment perspective, do we have to change the conversation with our more junior staff or with our employees about, actually, this is what the company wants to achieve. What do you want to achieve?
Yeah, I think it's spot on. It's about changing the conversation. It's not sitting and being, it's not like taking the whole kind of, oh, they're all woke snowflakes and moaning in a room. We're not all strictly come dancing where there's been a whole hoo-ha about that, which is the kind of classic model. It's looking at your customers and looking at employees. And the reality is there is more choice. There are different lenses. Actually, we've come from, our parents' generation would have been, find a job, stay in it for life, and if you're lucky, get promoted. And now it's like, what career do you start first for customers? Well, I'm going to shop around, I'm going to do this. So probably we're saying the word flaky, it might be the wrong, there is definitely an unreliableness, people not following through on commitments, which I would say is flaky. But the other side, I think it's more that you have to work hard for loyalty. So it's about being curious. So a big part of whether it's your commercial growth strategy, your staffing, employee engagement strategy, whatever it is being curious. A classic one I remember at work are these people wanting, we want to reward and retain people, so we're going to have a sort of an employee of the week or something, and attach balloons and things to people's chairs to say well done because they've done a brilliant job. And actually what happened was productivity went down because people didn't want the humiliation and embarrassment of having a balloon stuck to the back of their chair. So it was about being curious, what is important to them. So same as you're growing your business, being really curious, what is important. So it's not about, people tend to obsess about the competitors. Yeah. And I always say, don't obsess about your competitors, obsess about your customers. What are the challenges that they are facing? How are you going to help them? What do they really need from you? What do they understand? So being really curious about their world and the pressures that are on them. And yeah, it might be different to us, especially if you have a business for younger people. It's undoubtedly, it's an absolute trend. There's more awareness of mental health. There's more, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are all snowflakes, but they're much more aware of their mental health and aware of what they're entitled to. So you have to be curious and tailor it accordingly. So, and that's what I mean about a strategy. You have a core base strategy, but you constantly look to the outside world as what's going on, and you get really curious about your customers, what's impacting them, and you adapt it as you go to stay relevant, really.
Isn't also about the sort of bigger strategic objectives and how the strategies interpret it. So, so back to the point, people who are shopping around for prices, it is because there's been such an emphasis on growth that they've forgotten or ignored the relationship with existing customers. And we see on a slightly different basis, there's been a lot of companies who have their objective has been to maximize profits, so they've outsourced lots of capabilities. But a couple of examples: Boeing, CrowdStrike. They've actually lost control of the core purpose of the organization, which is to deliver quality in this area to these customers. So it's the unintended consequences of the strategic decision, isn't it? The focus, if you like.
Yeah, and I think, and it's just knowing. So there's nothing, you can make whatever decisions. It's your business to do whatever, but just to know the long-term impact and to know the relative. So it's all the whole time in strategy. It's relative importance, because of course everything in an ideal world was great, but a push comes to shove. What are you going to trade off? So if you do outsource it, you recognize, okay, this is going to give us greater profitability because it will. But this is what you're going to have to compromise as a result. And are you prepared to lose that? And thinking a little bit longer ahead than just the end of the year, like much further, what would it mean?
So, choices. It's about choices, you're saying. We have the choice to continue this fascinating conversation, or we have the choice to bring it to an end. And unfortunately, the clock is telling me that the latter is probably the right choice for now. So Natasha, it's been really nice talking to you.
Pleasure.
I loved your examples. I loved your insight, and I'd love to be a fly on the wall on some of your strategy sessions. I can imagine that you managed to tease out a lot of honesty through people who perhaps otherwise would have been happy to be quite cagey about not making choices or not being so explicit about what they think. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Great. Hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a real pleasure. And if I can leave you with one thing, if you're really struggling to define your business, turn it into a light bulb joke. Okay? So if you say to any business, how many, or whatever your business name is, how many employees of company X would it take to change a light bulb? If you ask your teams that, you'll get more richness from that answer than you will from any employee survey. Any bitterness will come out, how they feel about themselves, and everything will come out. So I've done that before, and that will give you all you need to do in a very simple joke format. So that's my answer, how comedy can help you.
Brilliant. Well, you heard it here first, viewers and listeners. I wonder how many companies answer that question with one, but
well, I did it with some dietitians, and they turned around and said, well, apparently none, because the consultants don't even know what we do. It all comes out. You get it all then. So, yeah.
Good stuff.
Ouch. Take that one on the chin. Right. Well, that was a great point to end. Thanks very much, Natasha. And thank you so much, viewers and listeners, for joining us on this episode. Do let us know what you thought of it, and whether you have any specific questions. As always, we are keen to hear from you. So thanks for joining us on this occasion, and looking forward to seeing you at our next episode. Bye.
Au revoir.
Bye.